Good evening, everyone. Welcome to JB Board Academy. Indeed, it is going to be very difficult for me welcoming our speakers after the practice session that we went through and the amazing insight that our speakers have given us today. I'm sure today's topic is going to be very close to everyone's heart, everyone's mind at the end of the session. On that note, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this webinar on the conundrum of cyber in the wake of pandemic. Cyber, which was like a small baby once upon a time, entered our hearts, our houses, our offices, like a small baby step. And now the way it has evolved, it is more like a demon that is sighting in front of us. And who more than pandemic would have been responsible for us to know the importance of cyber? As rightly said by Pawan, one of our speaker, that security comes at the last stage for us whenever it comes to IT. We think about technology, we think about everything, but security comes as a last resort. Today, this session is going to help you to understand why the security should be your first diameter of your infrastructure that you're building. On this note, I would like to welcome our very talented, uh, very intelligent speakers, Pawan Chawla. Now, on this note, Pawan Chawla is the Chief Information Security Officer in Future Generali Life Insurance. Hands down, the amazing experience that he has for more than 18 years in information technology is very robust. I'm sure he's going to leave you in bits with the information that he's going to share. You will laugh also, and you will think also whether I'm vulnerable for those information. Along with Pawan, I welcome Najam Bilgrami from Tata AIG, who is head on financial lines, and I'm sure Najam is busy in settling those tedious claims have reported to his desk. Some are large claims, and actually he's crying inside, but whilst there's a smile on his face. I welcome Jyoti Krishnan. As I said, that she is an extended family for JB Boda over here. So Jyoti is from Khaitan Legal Associates. She's an associate partner over there, and she is going to manage these two gentlemen in terms of the legal aspect that they both do not go wrong in conveying an information to you. Chaitanya, my colleague, is there to moderate this session at the end with the question and answers. As usual, please pop in all your question and answers using the chat section, and we will answer it back to you. We'll try to finish this session in 1 hour time, but this session is so interesting. The practice that we went through for the past 1 week, I don't think so we will be able to do justice in 1 hour. So there will be a spillover of 15-20 minutes. Please accommodate this. I'm sure you'll all will appreciate the time, the spillover time that we are asking over here. And at the end, we'll convey our vote of thanks. Thank you so much, and over to you, Chetan.
Thank you, Aruna. A very wonderful evening to everyone who's present today for this webinar. I think we have a full house today with Pawan Chawla giving us the perspective of the buyer of a cyber insurance policy. And he also happens to be the CISO of the organization that he works for. We have an underwriter in the house in the form of Najam and Jyoti to provide the legal perspective. Over to you two. Over to Pawan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaitanya, and thanks to Aruna for such a warm welcome. Good evening, everyone. So the way we look at cyber in the past, it is no more looked at like that in today's world. Was always the last thing which used to come in people's mind. When I say cyber, it's not only the cyber where you go on the internet and search for things which you want to look at. I'm talking about cyber security because it was always considered as the subset of information technology. But thanks to COVID, now it has become the primary product which people are looking at, and everybody should be focused upon. The infrastructure used to be always a primary product for every organization. The focus was all there on the infrastructure side, but with people, more and more people working from home has given importance to the cybersecurity. People have started understanding the importance of it, and now people are considering this as a primary product before they put the cybersecurity. Now, being into the industry for almost 18 years, the way I look at it is I always recommend that security does not start at the last stage. It is the first thing which you should put before even you think of building a product or putting something within your infrastructure. Like when you are buying a smartphone, before even after you turn it on, the first thing you do is put your key to secure itself, right? Now, that's the knowledge which people have started gaining today. Earlier, it used to be a phone which is the keypad phone where you're not used to be too much of keys. I remember. I mean, if people have used Nokia phones in the past, they must be able to correlate this. There used to be only one security which was there, which was the star key, which used to lock the phone. But today, you can put your fingerprint. You can there is a fingerprint scanner, there is a face scanner, and there is 6 or 8 digit key which you can put in, or probably you can put a numeric passwords there. Now, coming back to the current scenario where we are living today under this COVID pandemic, in the last 5 months, the industry has changed a lot. Uh, to give you some perspective, the number of attacks which are happening today, they are not uh, one or two or thousand. The number of attacks has gone by 30,000% up since January, ever since the COVID has started. To give you the real number, uh, there are more than 500,000 domains registered in the name of COVID, which are getting used only for this phishing attacks. I will touch base on phishing attacks in a little bit. I'll explain that what phishing attacks is and how you can be how you can make sure that you are not a victim of a phishing attack, and give you a little perspective that what kind of attacks are happening here today. Uh, there are, like I said, more than 500,000 domains which are registered. The phishing emails which are getting generated are in millions, not even in thousands or lakhs. It is more than millions of emails which are getting circulated every day. People are getting, the hackers are playing with human emotions today, because everyone is looking for only three key things. One is mask, second is sanitizer, third is when is COVID getting over. So people are searching these three information, and hackers are using advantage of only these three information. If you Google it out, there are n number of websites which are just giving you data that how many COVID patients do you have in your within your area or within your city. Now, considering that, uh, just think over it that when you are searching those websites, what are they getting? It's just an information which they are sharing with you. But practically, if you look at it, there are many things an hacker can do when you are searching those information, and you won't even come to know about it because there is a backend code which is pulling some information out from your cookie which are stored on your machine. That's one aspect of it, but I don't want to scare you out. It's just an information which I am passing. But like, coming back to the phishing attack, the kind of attacks which are happening, the recent one is the moratorium scheme which was launched by RBI. So you might have also received SMS with a link to fill in the information to obtain that uh, advantage of that scheme. So many people have filled that out, but what actually had happened, bank has never sent those SMSs. It's the hacker who have created the SMS codes and have circulated those links in which they have collected the information of your loan, your bank detail, and your personal IDs, which we call it as personal identification information. Your name, phone number, your email ID, your address, and certain other things, which people have given it very happily. Another aspect I will touch base here is India is always known as a vomiting country, because here in India we vomit information. Will give you a little perspective here. We go to the mall. We There is a guy who is standing there asking you to fill the information to give you a free holiday. What we do? We happily fill that form, and we share them the personal information. And in some of the form, we share the critical information as well, like mother's maiden name or date of birth or other things. But think over it. It's just correlate, and then they can use it in many different ways. And that's what hackers are looking at today. In the current scenario, we have seen the hackers have become sophisticated, and the kind of attacks which are happening today are what we have not seen in the past, but we have been made aware of it. With that, I would like to give you an insight of a particular video which I saw 2 years back. It was created by Cisco, which is called Anatomy of an Attack. I highly recommend you look at that video. It is freely available on YouTube. You can search it, and you will see that what they have created 3 or 4 years back, it's still valid today. The hackers are using same sophisticated technologies which people are getting vulnerable to, and we are still sharing that information which has already been warmed about so a few years back. Now to see whether in the present scenario whether you are vulnerable or not, I give you a link to check out the information, which is there is a website called Have I Been Pawned. If you go there, it will ask you to enter the email ID. You can search that. The moment you enter the email ID, you will get to see on which all domains you have entered the information, and if they have been hacked, you are also got compromised, because we as a human has an habit of keeping the same password, and your username and password has been hacked there. Now, giving that perspective, I'll give you some insight on the phishing attacks which are happening today, and that's what we have experienced as well, personally as well, and in the organization. The hackers are today not only doing phishing attack by sending an email. So it has become more sophisticated, and they are doing spear phishing attack and whaling attack. Now, what is the difference between a spear phishing and a whaling? Spear phishing is targeted to certain individual, and there is a whaling attack which is targeting your senior level people who has an authority to take a decision in your organization. So if uh, many organizations have already experienced it, where their CFO has got an email which seems to be like from the CEO for transferring certain information. Now, CFO, if they do not talk to the CEO, they won't even realize that this email is not from the CEO. They might have transferred the money as well, which the CEO has asked for. Now, these kind of attacks have become much more sophisticated today. The other one which I can talk about is the ransomware, which has recently touched on Cognizant. So there is still not, we don't still unclarity where how it happened, but that's again a sophisticated attack which was planted for an organization where certain section of the organization was on the got compromised and have been attacked. So all these things which hackers are doing today, and people are they are playing with human emotion and taking advantage of it. So we need to be very, very cautious, and we need to take care of a lot of things when we talk about cyber, and we look at cyber as a product, as a commodity, and we experience that in day-to-day life. Uh, Now, talking about that, now when we look at considering the cyber insurance for an organization, so we have to look at many aspects. As a CISO, I look at multiple aspects to from that perspective. Uh, Now, some of them are considered because we answer certain questions. Some of them are not considered because those are the hidden terms and conditions which are there. So I would like to invite my colleague Najam here. Najam, what if an organization has to look at the cyber insurance? What aspect we should look at? Because there are certain things which we can answer, but there are certain things which are hidden. So when doing an underwriting, what you should look at?
Okay, thanks, Pawan. So when it comes to cyber policy, and to answer your specific question, see, from the underwriting point of view, what we see, of course, the kind of business activity which the clients in, because what we see, like when it comes to financial institution, when it comes to health organization who are having health data, these are the organization who are the target for of the hackers. And especially like you have immediately, like they're getting money out of it when they have financial data or when they have health data. But when it comes to other organization, of course, the other area of concern, what we see, manufacturing is another area, like wherein like we see most number of attacks. So that's one. Business activity is one of the most important thing. The other thing which we look at is, of course, the geographical revenue. So from where the revenue is getting generated. Of course, why it is very important for us, because the kind of privacy law, the data protection law which those jurisdictions have, that's another. How litigious is that particular society? That's another a concern from the underwriting point of view. So we of course look at that. Then we also evaluate the company's three aspects, and that's very important. That's the technology which they use, the processes, and the people. So we by several questions on the proposal form, we look at those. So how aware is the organization of the cyber security, and subsequently how they are training their own employees. Because what we see, almost 40% of the claims are not coming because of a technology failure or because of a process failure. It is because the unawareness of the employee. So that's one very important point which we look at. The other thing could be like the kind of outsourcing activity an organization is doing. So that's another area which we look at while we do underwriting. Now coming back to the change which we are seeing after COVID. It's too early for an underwriter or for an insurance company to say that, okay, these 3 claims which I have received last week are due to COVID, because as I said, like it's too early to comment on it. But yes, if I relate the kind of data which is available, so the IBM report says that the average time to identify a hack globally is 7 months. So what we expect at this point of time, probably like, and the kind of numbers which you're throwing, that these are the kind of breaches which is happening globally, and these are the kind of attacks which we are seeing on a regular basis, which has got increased after January. So definitely, like what we expect as an insurer, that in next 6 months to 1 year, there will be huge increase in numbers on the claim side, and probably like a kind of extortion demand or business interruption, or probably the data breach. Those were kind of the claims which we expect in next 6 months to 1 year time.
Thanks, Nazar. So like you correctly say it, so I would like to put some light here as well, where I talked about the number of the kind of attacks which have happened in last 5 months. So the attacks have not grown by 100 or 200 or 1000%. They have gone up to by 30,000%. And most of the attacks were phishing attacks. So if I break it up, the 85% of the attacks which had happened are the phishing attacks. There were 25% attack overall, which were of phishing, mix of phishing and malware attack. And there was 17% attacks which were targeting the organizations. So these kinds of attacks which had happened in last 5 months today, and these are the numbers which are easily available on the internet. Everybody can look at it. So considering that, so what is the kind of percentage you see that the claim will, what percentage the claim will increase in the given time, or what you foresee will come in the given time?
Okay, again, it's a difficult question to answer because the data which we can evaluate. So unfortunately, in India, it's a new product. And 2014, when we launched this product first time in India, and if you ask me today, there are something around 700 to 800 policies, the cyber policies, which all the insurance companies have put together, sold on the cyber space. So extremely difficult to tell you, like, out of those 800 policies in next 6 months, the kind of percentage increase. Definitely, I can tell you, yes, there will be increase in numbers in claims, but because we don't have any historical data, and even moreover, this current situation, the pandemic, is again something very new, which no one has expected. So difficult to put out any number, but yes, the insurers expect the number to go probably like in 2-digit. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of expectation which we have.
Interesting. So I'll go to Jyoti. So Jyoti, what kind of so when it comes to the insurance, and when there is a claim which gets filed, what do you think would be the perspective there in terms of fine and the penalties which will be levied on the organization or the individuals involved in it?
Thanks, Pawan. That's actually quite an interesting question, because traditionally speaking, we have seen that a lot of policies have a clear-cut exclusion for fines and penalties. And unlike Western countries, like say US, for example, or rather UK, they have a specific act which deals with insurance and talks about what can be insured, what cannot be. India doesn't operate in that manner. We do not have a clear-cut guidelines on what is insurable and what is not. We have guidelines on who can seek insurance for what, but we don't have clear guidelines on what can be deemed to be insurable or not. Now, if we see a number of policies, now broadly speaking, at least in my experience, what I have seen with respect to fines and penalties is I have seen policies where there's a clear-cut exclusion on fines and penalties, which means any kind of fine, any kind of penalty, no coverage. We also have policies where civil fines have been included. Now, that's where the interesting part comes in. Because one, again, Indian law does not have a concept, at least in law, we don't have civil fines. We have civil offenses and we have criminal offenses. Now, whether they will allude to a fine or no becomes a big question. The second point is, now there are fines which are being sort of levied for actions which are arising out of, say, negligence. Or standard example, I mean, it's not a cyber example, but like the LG Polymer case. Now, they are going to have a concept of absolute liability, which means without even looking at their causation, there is a certain sort of a fine that has been imposed on them. Now, whether it's a civil fine or a criminal fine, that becomes an important question. Broadly speaking, courts have given some indication on what can be construed as a civil fine and criminal fine. So when the question is about intention of the parties, when the criminal mindset has been put in motion, then the court would usually look at the fine being a criminal fine. Whereas if the fine is of nature, is more of a directory in nature, or intended to basically put down a strict procedure for non-compliance, but it's not going into the intention of the party as to whether they wanted to cause it, they did not want to cause it, did they criminally act, was there a dishonest intent? If all of those aspects are not there, then it would be civil fine. And if the policy sort of covers civil fine, then such kind of fines would usually get covered. The third category, I believe, is the most interesting, because there we have policies which will say fines and penalties insured to the extent insurable by law. Now, again, as I said, Indian law does not say what fine is insurable. So now is where it's all open, especially for people like me who are lawyers, to sort of consider and construe what that means. And I think Najam will be able to add his point of view there, but I think I have seen a lot of interesting discussion on the subject. So first and foremost is fine as a concept. Traditionally, why did fine even come into play? It was intended to deter a person from doing a certain act. The intention was that if I slap a fine on somebody, that person will not do that action again. It's deterrent in its effect. If we start ensuring such things, then are we really saying that, okay, you go ahead, commit the crime, I'm standing behind you to ensure it? So that is that's where the whole public policy angle comes in. That is why the insurers don't have an option yet but to say to the extent insurable by law, because the law is not talking about insurance right now. They're not talking about what's insurable, what's not. It's left to the sort of a interpretation of parties, and obviously a safer interpretation makes more sense. Now, the small answer to the larger question is civil fines is what I would say I have seen being insured. Criminal fines is what I would say I have categorically seen being excluded. Another category of fine I have seen is pecuniary penalty, which again coincides with civil fines actually. But yes, to answer your question, civil nature of the fine would be covered. Criminal for sure will not find coverage on account of it being contrary to public policy.
Okay. Nazam, would you like to add on the third point which Jyoti was mentioning?
Yeah, so the same view when those fines, the administrative fine which we are talking about, the civil fine which we are talking about, if it's civil in nature, not intentional, then definitely there is a provision in the policy to pick up that, unless and until the law of the land restrict the insurer to pay. Otherwise, yes, definitely policy has a provision, and in fact, to be precise on cyber policy, if we talk about, there is a provision in the policy wherein if suppose there is any regulatory action, investigation, policy do have a protection for the insured to hire a law firm to defend themselves, to present themselves, and then subsequently if there's any administrative fine put on them, policy do have a cover for that as well. As I said, and Jyoti mentioned that it comes with a caveat called subject to insurability of that particular incident. So that's how the insurers operate.
Okay. Okay. we all know how the hackers work and that some of the attacks which we see on a day-to-day basis. We keep on getting emails on our in our email box. So if I hope everybody is using an email today, and if you see that in your Google email box as well, so there are certain emails which come in your inbox, or if there are certain emails which goes into the spam folder. So if you have not configured your spam folder correctly, that those emails will come into your email box, and half of the email were either selling a medicine to grow your hair, or there is a free holiday which has been given to you. And at one point of time, somebody might have clicked on those. Right? These are the two problems which people are a solution to. So hackers are finding all these ways to trap an individual and pull out the information. So there is a new uh, wave, which has just come in, and I have personally experienced that in recent times. There, so we have heard the terms called ransomware, and we have also heard the term of cyber extortion. Now, these used to be two different terms. So there was, you might have heard in the newspaper as well that there is a ransomware attack which had happened in so and so organization. The recent example is the Cognizant example, where the ransomware attack had happened. The Maze ransomware, which was plotted there. Uh, there is a ransomware attack which had happened in Johannesburg power station. There is a ransomware attack which had happened in the power station in Britain. Now, we have also heard that there is a cyber extortion attack which had happened in many organizations, because this is very common, where hackers steal the information and then ask for money to not revealing that data in the darknet. Now, recently, what has been observed is, now these two things have is been combined together, and people who are creating ransomware are asking extortion as well. So they are taking money to unencrypt your data. The way ransomware work is they plot a malware in your system and encrypt all the data. Then you have to pay money to get that data unencrypted so that you can use it. So what they have started doing is they have started pulling out the data by planting the ransomware as well. At the same time, they pull the data out, and then after you pay for ransom, they have started asking you the extortion money as well for not releasing that data on the darknet. So as a CISO, I would like to understand, will that be covered in the insurance policy?
Yep. So when you talk about this particular situation or the incident, the coverage under the policy is with respect to forensics. Yes, the policy have a cover available for forensics, and I would like to stress upon it that the policy don't even say that for an actual event, even if it is an alleged event wherein you suspect something has gone wrong and probably a breach of your data or the system have been compromised, on the malwares have been installed in your system, and if you're like going for an forensics activity, the policy do have a cover for that. Now, after that, if suppose this is a correct event and then subsequently you need probably there's a corruption to the data is corrupt, and then you probably like due to that particular attack, there is a provision in the policy for the recreation cost of that data. Further, even monitoring is available under the policy. So if you like those data has been compromised and you would like to monitor in the cyber space that how that data is getting used, of course, again, forensics guy will do those activities, and there will be professional fee charge for that. So again, policy has a provision to pay those professional fee. And moreover, when it comes to even extortion demand, there is a cover available to pay the ransom money as well under the policy.
Okay. The coverage is limited, right? So there is so as the hacks are happening every day, and there is this the way attacks are happening, they are getting sophisticated day by day. So is there a provision to increase the coverage during a period of time and include the more sophisticated attacks which are getting highlighted every day? So there is a term which we can use while buying a policy, and there are certain attacks which we can consider, and that's what I'm sure you would be looking at, that what is the coverage we're providing and to what kind of attack we are providing to. So will there be a provision to increase the coverage during the period itself, and then ensuring that the new kind of attacks are getting covered in the policy?
So there are two things. One, and I will answer both the things. One, yes, midterm, we as an insurance company, we are open to review the risk if the exposure has increased and probably you're looking for a higher limit or broader cover under the policy. We are definitely open to review the proposal and subsequently extend the cover. So that's one. Second, policy is broad enough to pick up. So policy don't restrict that. Okay, we are talking about X, Y, Z as an attack which is covered under the policy. Policy is broad and it talks about unauthorized access, breach of data, wherein like in such incidents without restricting the insured that okay X, Y, Z will covered and A, B, C will not covered. That's not the way the policy is designed. So I don't think so you will find issue with respect to that. But yes, definitely, like in this particular case, if we talk about the COVID and your exposure has increased, then in that case, yes, we are okay to review probably like if you need a higher limit or a product cover, which probably you may not have opted when you bought the policy, that can be done.
Okay, interesting. So Jyoti, when it comes to fines and penalties, what is your context on that? I mean, from Indian context, from Indian point of view, what should be the point of view from the insurer side?
Pan, actually, when you say fines and penalties, there's one aspect that one needs to keep in mind in addition to what we discussed about insurability. The real question is, as an insured, if fine is imposed on me in India. Now, why I'm talking about this is the Indian Data Protection Bill is still a bill. It's not an act. So as an insured, if fine is imposed on me, then as Najam was saying that there are provisions which will apply. Of course, it's a first party law. So you'll have to see your policy and see whether there's those kind of costs are getting covered. Yes, no, etc. The second and more important aspect that I'm seeing sort of coming on the surface more and more is Indian insured who's a vendor to a foreign company or a contracting party to a foreign company. And invariably what would happen is when an Indian organization provides services to a foreign organization, under the contract, they would pass on their fines and penalties to the Indian organization. Which means if due to Indian organization's inability to protect their data, if the foreign organization has to be subjected to fine or any penalties in their jurisdiction, which are likely to be far higher than what the Indian legal context provides for, then sometimes they would pass on that through contract to the Indian entity. Now, in this scenario, the Indian entity's cyber cover won't actually sort of catch or won't apply to the fine, because it'll at best come under the PI policy. Of course, it will be subject to the exclusions of contractual liability, etc. But that is one interface that I'm seeing a number of clients in India that they need to be very clear about. I've had at least 4 or 5 of our MNC clients who are dealing with, they're all Indian clients, but they deal with a number of foreign organizations. If they've come back to us saying that my counterparty has been fined and they're asking me to pay on account of a cyber attack, will my cyber policy cover? Now, that distinction has to be drawn. Cyber policy will cover fine that is imposed on you. If you assume fine as a part of your liability or as a part of your contractual services, then that won't get covered in your cyber policy at all. So I think that distinction is something that I'm seeing is not very clear in the minds of an insured. Before moving on, one aspect that I wanted to actually add to when we were discussing the whole ransom attack. There's one more one question that we always get from our clients is, if we pay ransomware, is it in violation of law? So, and will there be an exclusion for it? Now, even if there is an exclusion for violation of law, payment of ransomware is not necessarily illegal, purely speaking. Of course, if there is connected acts to it, like along with ransom, you're also procuring unauthorized data and handing over to somebody, then of course there is some illegality to it. But pure and clear ransom, like kidnap ransom, when I pay it, it's not illegal. Asking for ransom is illegal. So even that distinction is very important. And in fact, the reason I bring this about is there was in fact a case where a person was kidnapped, and then that he was a director of a company. He was on duty, and basically they were in an Naxalite area, and he got kidnapped by the local goons. And one of the questions that arose for that company is the ransom that they have paid for the director, they were trying to see if it can be tax deducted. And as a part of that whole case, the High Court went on record to say that payment of ransom is not illegal. Asking of ransom is illegal. So every associated benefit that you have, like policy, if your policy catches it, please feel free to go ahead and ask for it.
Oh, that's very interesting aspect which you gave, that asking ransom is legal, that paying ransom is not illegal.
Yeah, because paying, again, it's you're not strictly speaking in law, there's no section in the IPC which says you cannot pay ransom.
And so with that, I would like to touch base on the human errors, because whatever hacks today happen is because of the human error only. And we all are vulnerable today. Even if we get an email, until unless we click, there will be no attack. The messages we get, until unless we respond to those messages, we will not get, the data will not get compromised. With that, today, I have personally seen the highly of online platforms which we use today, like Instagram, Facebook. There is information everywhere, and hackers are actually looking at those, looking for those information. And not only these platforms, there are certain platforms which people are using, students are using to study, but those platforms are also getting used by the hackers to steal the information in many forms and used for certain criminal activities as well. So I'll give you an example of a website called Pastewin. It started as a product which students can use to store notes, but today that particular product has been used for by hackers to share the information with the companies of which they have stole the data. So how they do it is, if a hacker has stolen some data, I will definitely ask a proof whether to authenticate whether they have actually they have the data which belongs to me or not. So what they do is they paste that data on that Pastewin and they ask me, give me that link to verify that data. And then once the data is verified, they ask for money. So so why I touch base on this, this has happened because of the human error. So does the human error gets covered in the insurance, and does the company is liable to pay for that, or it's get covered in the insurance itself?
No, so Pawan, I would like to answer this. So if you read the insuring clause, the first clause itself says act, error, and omission. So definitely, if there is an error or omission on the part of the insured, policy do cover the exposure under the policy.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Great.
I think I just wanted to add one small point to what Najam said. He's perfectly on the point that the whole concept of the policy starts with indemnification on account of human act, error, negligence, etc. But I think lately what we are also seeing, an example that I have come across very recently is, now we have organizations where there's a proper human error, where an employee out of curiosity clicks on a phishing link, etc. That happens all the time. We're also seeing cases where disgruntled employees are purposely clicking on these links, so with the hope that a malware comes in. And now I'm not saying that every time you click something has to come. It may come, it may not come. But the point is, now in this situation, if it's a disgruntled, how do we differentiate between a disgruntled employee who did this intentionally versus human error? That is something that is also becoming because at the time the click was made, the employee didn't tell anyone. And from a general scheme of things, it's difficult to prove intent in such situations, because as you said, one of the biggest scams today in cyberspace is phishing. So the fact that somebody clicked on a phishing email is not so uncommon, and it's very difficult to attribute intent unless that person has a history of other activities trying to hurt the organization. Then it's a different matter. But otherwise, that's another aspect that we're seeing from a legal standpoint. It gets difficult to pinpoint as to which was a human error and which one was a criminal act, because a criminal act would ideally see an exclusion in the policy.
No, so again, Jyoti, I would like to add here. So when it comes to cyber policy, even if there is an intentional act on the part of the employee, so in fact, a rogue employee making a third-party data compromised, and due to which you receive a legal liability on you, that gets definitely covered under the policy. What policy exclude is the especially for people, that's your director, principal partner or chief information security officer. If those guys are involved, the policy do restrict the cover there. But again, it comes with a clause called final adjudication wording, wherein like the insurer will pay till the time it is proved in the court of law. That means that those directors or the chief information security officers were involved in that particular act. So
it's actually it's a great thing that you said what you said, because very recently I came across a claim where same clause was there, basically a final adjudication clause, a clause which excludes dishonesty provided the dishonesty is proven by the court of law or an arbitral award. However, it was an insurer with whom I was having this discussion, and claim had arisen, and the insurer is refusing to pay till they're convinced about the lack of dishonesty. So I had the same discussion with them, saying that the whole point of adding that provision in the policy is to make sure that you pay till the dishonesty is proven. But somehow, practically, I'm not saying it's you, Najam. It's an insurer I'm dealing with, and they are now taking advantage of this clause to not pay till the dishonesty is not proven.
No, so policy nowhere says that the insurer will wait. In fact, there are clauses which specifically say that the insurer will pay the claims as soon as they receive the complete documents and the invoices. And as I said, it's a final adjudication, so I don't think so. Any which way that stand which probably whoever has taken is right. Because policy very specifically says that insurer will pay till the time it is proved in the court. All said and done, insurer do have the right of subrogation once it is proved that those guys were involved. But till the time it is not proved, it's insurer's duty to pay those expenses which they have incurred in that particular claim.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a clause in this policy that I'm talking about. There's a specific clause which says the insurer will pay within 30 days of receipt of all the relevant information. And if coverage is not found, then the insured will reimburse. So the policy recognizes the liability to pay upfront and then wait for reimbursement in case of lack of coverage. Despite this, I'm just sharing a practical experience that I have had recently.
Oh, good. See, every organization has their own internal policies. They have cybersecurity policies, and like I said, that if the cyber attacks happens with a human error, so with a small click, a small click can have a big impact. So, what are the cyber security or preventive measures that a company can take to build a strong, resilient system, apart from the policies they have, and still the hacks happen?
So as I said, like training is one of the most critical area, and especially a country like India where we see a very low awareness with respect to cybersecurity. And I believe you are the right person to answer this question. Because we as an underwriter, or probably Jyoti as a lawyer, we may have limited knowledge with respect to this. But definitely, like one thing which I would like to add is the awareness is very much required, and probably I would like to listen your comment on this.
Definitely, the way I look at it is exactly the same. Unless you make people aware of it, and you have to keep them reminding again and again, so that they do not make the same mistake again and again. We humans have a tendency of repeating things. So once we make a mistake, we again will do the same mistake again, unless it has brought us a big damage. So most probably, what happens is when an individual is working in an organization or in our personal life as well, unless we face a financial loss, we don't feel that there is a damage which had happened, or unless we have hurt somebody which has a big impact, we keep on repeating doing the same thing again and again. And especially it's a human nature. When you ask somebody not to touch anything, he or she will definitely try to touch that thing to feel that out, that what it is. So that's what it happens, and that's why you see that everybody keep on sending us email, whether it is bank, the insurance companies, or government keep on reminding us not to do certain things. But still, the attacks are increasing. I have explained that the attacks within this 5 months have gone up by 30,000%. It's not 3,000%. It is, I'm repeating again, it is 30,000%. That attacks have increased in last just 5 months. And if the COVID continues, this pandemic continues, the attack will keep on increasing as well. The recent example we all have seen, you might have heard in the newspaper as well, though the newspapers are not coming these days, but on the internet, our IT minister website got hacked. And there was the PM Care is a classic example. PM Care, the UPI code which was created to transfer the money in PM Fund, somebody created just by one word, which is the S. The original UPI code was PM Cares. Somebody created PM Care and started publishing that over WhatsApp or SMS, and people started transferring money in that account. But that's just a human error. And think of a hacker mind. What is there in the hacker's mind to build such kind of an attack and execute that as well? They are not worried whether they will get caught or they will get jailed or anything. No, they are not worried. They live in a different world. They walk they work completely different. Not even the way we can think of at this point of time, because the way they are getting sophisticated, the way they are increasing the kind of attacks which are happening, uh, I believe that it is beyond our imagination that what they could do next. But what we can do is we can make sure that we are not prone to that, and what we can do to secure ourselves. So I would like to understand from the underwriting perspective, Najam, what an organization should take care while thinking of a cyber insurance to ensure that the coverage is enough to cover those attacks.
Okay, see, I will tell you, when it comes to cyber, our study says that, of course, the 100% cyber risk can't be covered under the cyber policy. There are exposures like your goodwill loss, the impact on operations, the devaluation of the probably your property or your plants or your trademark. So these things can't be insured under the cyber policy. But yes, it's a wide policy covering first party expenses as well as the third party legal liability which is coming on you, and policy not only pays the defense cost, but even if there is any damage awarded against you, the policy do cover that as well. Even when it comes to the first party expenses, starting from forensics to legal consultation with respect to even if it is a third party claim, or probably even if there is any regulatory investigation against the insured, policy do provide those covers. Not only that, even if you're like doing some damage control, hiring a PR agency to do the damage control for the organization, as well as for the probably the directors or the chief information security officers who have been named, or probably the failure or these breach have been put against them. In such situations, if you're hiring a PR agency, the policy do have those provisions. This policy do cover the business interruption as well. You have extortion losses. Not only that, in fact, there's another cover. Of course, if you ask me, probably like that's not very relevant to a cyber breach, but policy do have extensions with regards to multimedia. So if there's any, so if you see like in recent past, we have seen a lot of websites getting hacked, and they've put some pictures or the comments, which is like probably may bring a third party claim against them. So again, like from forensics to even a third party claim with respect to that, wherein like you may incur defense costs and damages, policy do have those covers inbuilt under the policy.
From a claim perspective, how do you see different policies overlapping with cyber insurance?
Yes, yes, Jyoti, you want to interrupt?
No. Why don't you start? I'll add after you finish.
Okay. So there are two policies specifically I see there are covers overlapping. One is, of course, your professional indemnity policy, wherein you see the data liability on the insured gets picked up in both the policies. The other thing which we see is the crime cover. So there are certain policies wherein like the first party crime covers are offered as an extension. Although, again, it's a part of a crime policy, but as an extension, the policy do have those covers, and especially in India, we see this practice. Otherwise, globally, that's not the way cyber insurance is dealt. There is a separate cover for crime insurance, which cover the first party financial loss, and then there is a separate policy for the cyber exposure. But in India, as I said, like we have a practice wherein like we provide some sublimited cover for social engineering fraud, and policy have the cover what you call in both the policies, in the cyber as well as in the crime policy. Jyoti, over to you.
In fact, that's absolutely right. All right. Matlab, that's precisely what I was about to say, that in terms of interface, there are 3 or 4 liability policies that we have seen clearly interfacing with a cyber policy. Although, in addition to a PI and a crime, another policy that we actually saw having an interface is, we had a major cyber breach in the United States in about 2017, where obviously the cyber policy picked up the breach and the third-party losses, etc. Now, because of the cyber breach, the share value of the company dropped drastically, because the company was involved in data, was basically data heavy in terms of a sector. And on that account, the shareholders filed a class action suit. Now, that suit got caught in the D&O policy. So all I'm trying to say is, although the trigger could be a cyber event, what you look at from a cyber standpoint, it could be a cyber attack, hacking, ransomware, as the case may be, but it can lead to different kind of liability policies being triggered. So as we were also discussing before, professional indemnity liability. Similarly, it can also happen that on a company, data has been sort of disseminated. And if I am facing a third party suit as an organization, and in that suit my directors are being implemented, then it's not my cyber policy, it's being seen more and more. And the more we go deep into these policies to find out what they cover and what they don't, we'll be able to see that there is a strong interface amongst the various liability policies.
I agree.
We have recently seen that most of the data which organizations are storing today, so there are some new policies which have been brought in, and practically we have also done that. So like BYOD or moving on the cloud, and because of this COVID situation, many people are working from home. So how the policy will respond to these issues if there is any issue come because of all these things, by moving data onto the cloud or allowing people to use their personal devices and using certain resources which are there at their home.
The most relevant question, Pawan, I would like to tell you, and probably like every day, at least 5 to 7 times, I'm speaking to the clients and informing them about this. And as I said, it's the most apt question at this point of time. So I will answer this and I'll take some time. So first, starting with your BYOD, bring your own device. In fact, from the underwriting point of view, it's a worrisome fact for me. In fact, there was one report I was reading about wherein like they said that the 51% companies have allowed the employees to work from their own personal IDs as well as the personal equipments, bar like laptop or mobiles and all. Now, this is definitely increasing the exposure when it comes to insurance company. Now, coming back to the policy, if you see, as far as the third-party legal liability is concerned, it's not tied in with your computer system, which defines the company's asset. Probably your laptop is not your company asset. Your mobile may not be your company asset. So, as far as the third-party legal liability claims are concerned, there's no doubt about it. It will get picked up in the policy without any doubt. So, any third-party claim which probably may arise because of use of your personal laptops or personal what you call Wi-Fi and things like that, policy will pick up those claims and pay those claims on behalf of the insured. Now, coming back to the first party expenses, if you see the covers like your business interruption, your covers like extortion threat, these are linked with your company's computer system. And your company, your BYOD doesn't fall under the company's computer system. But if you go in detail, when we are talking about these breaches, these hacks, this will be ultimately probably they may get routed from your system, but ultimate breach will happen to your company's computer system, and from there the data breach may happen, the business interruption may happen, or probably an extortion demand may arise. So in all those situations, again policy will respond. The only situation which I see, if it is a very small organization or probably you're using a personal laptop and then subsequently you're also having a crucial data which may impact your business interruption, as well as like those personal, the data from those personal computers can be used as an extortion threat, then there is an issue. Probably policy may not respond to that, subject to policy terms and condition. But as I said, in most of the cases, like if you ask me a percentage, probably like 70 to 80% claims still will get picked up, even if you're using BYOD. Reason why? Because see, ultimately the breach will not happen on that particular system or mobile or laptop which you're using. It will be from there, your system, the hackers will ultimately get a path by your VPN or other connections which you're using and reach out to companies' computer system. There the actual damage will happen. So policy will trigger and probably pick up those expenses. That's my take on this.
Okay. So when we started the discussion, you did mention that there will be a forensic and there will be a forensic cost which is already covered in the insurance policy which is there. And the basis understanding there, whatever, if it is proven, then the premium will get paid. So I'll give you an example of another phishing attack, which is called wishing attack, which is on voice, where you will not find any proof. It is a kind of attack where somebody will pretend to be your wife, will call you and or call your bank to get some account details or some money transfer from somewhere. So there will be no track of it. How those kind of attacks are getting covered in the policy?
So as
Jyoti, sorry, Nazar, I'll come to you, Jyoti, how you safeguard your client in these kind of attacks.
No, let Najam complete his view and then I can add to how to safeguard.
So again, Pawan, as I said in my initial comments, policy do have a provision wherein it's an actual or an alleged incident. In both the cases, policy will pay the forensics and other cost. So even as I said, it's a wishing attack or a phishing attack, and ultimately leading to a system breach, which is the trigger in the policy. So policy will respond to, and even if, as I said, like when you talk about, there is a term used in the policy with respect to any event or any what you call news which is in public domain with respect to that particular organization, probably that may be hampering the goodwill of the company, then policy will respond. So newsworthy event is defined in the policy, and as I said, like if there's any actual or alleged event against that organization and probably having impact on the organization, policy will respond to those claims. So I will talk about like few of the incident, like WannaCry was one of the incident wherein few of our insured was having so there was news about them that there are public in the public domain about the breach, that those organizations got compromised, their systems got compromised and all. After the forensics, we came to know that there were no such incident, but definitely policy picked up the forensics cost to ascertain whether the hack has happened or whether the data is compromised or their systems have got compromised or not. So that's the way policy will attend those claims.
So in this case, you did the forensic and something which was proved, and you got the evidence as well, and that's why the policy got involved.
No. So we haven't got. Sorry. So we haven't got any proof that. Those were like false alarms. So policy do pick up the cost subject to the retention or the other conditions in the policy. If there is an expense, because policy very specifically saying the condition. So if I can relate, like when you talk about a health insurance policy wherein there is only investigation has been done, which is not followed by treatment or surgery, policy don't pay for that. But when it comes to cyber, it doesn't work like that. Even if there is an investigation on certain ground, and probably after the investigation is everything's fine, still the policy will pay the cost of the investigation. That's how cyber behaves.
I think I wanted to add one point to that as well. So from the point of view that Pawan, you're coming that if it's a voice related measure, you may not be able to find proof of there being a sort of a, how do I say, personification, for example, impersonation. Now, there are two essential elements here. One is the language of the policy. As Najam correctly pointed out, the definition of the computer system or whatever is the core trigger, it talks about communication methods also. So to
Correct.
Quite an extent, even if it is someone else calling, if it is by unauthorized access to a system, then that should get picked up. That is the first point. And the second point is now here from a legal standpoint, and I was just thinking about it. First of all, even if it's phone banking for that matter, unless and until that person has my details which are required for initiation of phone banking, this process will be little difficult. And if they already have my detail, which they have obviously obtained by unauthorized access, then my cyber policy is already triggered. So what I'm trying to get at is, in every such circumstance, there will be a trigger that we'll be able to pinpoint one way or the other. Either the information was accessed by unauthorized access, which was my trigger, and then it was used to cause me loss, or the direct action was an unauthorized access, which landed up causing me loss. So we, in one way or the other, the trigger, as Najam is saying, the trigger under the policy is so wide that it catches on the moment there is a interface, the computer system.
And I would like to add the other point, Pawan, which you asked, is the change of risk. So probably an organization is not using cloud service, and during this period, they have to move their data to cloud. This is a change in risk. And advice from the insurer or an underwriter that you should be informing your insurer about this, that yes, probably like prior, once we placed that policy with you, we were not using like cloud services, but now we are using. The insurer has to like review and then come back to you with the premium or the coverage with respect to that. But yes, because of COVID, if there's any major change in the process or technology which is changing the risk, my advice that you should be informing your insurer or your underwriter about the change in risk.
That's a valid advice. So, Jyoti, I have a question for you. The financial frauds are on the rise. What is your advice to the client to handle such situations?
I think from a financial fraud point of view, over and above what we have discussed in thus far, I think first and foremost, at all points in time, it is awareness. Sometimes we may not even realize that what we are doing is going to lead to a cyber attack. I think that's where I would start. Because as you correctly said, that people don't know what they're doing is going to lead to a cyber attack. Like clicking on an email may not lead to your computer crashing down immediately, but it can lead to malware being introduced into your system, which will sit there and then sort of, it will lead to an attack taking place many months later. So one would be to create awareness within organizations. It's one thing for the senior management to know about it. It's another for the junior most employee to know about it. What I am seeing more and more is people who are on the ground need to be aware of this. People who are actually accessing technological systems, computer system, mobiles, something as simple as now each one of us has our mobile where we operate our emails. Our emails are connected to our mobile and we have it configured. And our mobile is something that we use at our ability and at our expense, which means it's not as secure as my company laptop, for example. But it's important that every employee is made aware of the fact that every click you make on your mobile can introduce a malware into your cell, which can then, if you connect it to your laptop for transfer of information, that's it. So that kind of awareness needs to be created, that it's not just about security at your work computer. It is about security of all phases of the various devices that you interconnect for exchange of information. So many times for ease of operation, we'll end up forwarding from our personal email IDs to our official email ID. Or sometimes official email IDs are not accepting server. As recent as last weekend, I was interacting with a client and they needed a very urgent advice. I sent it to them on a Saturday morning, and Saturday evening I got a call saying we have not received your email. So obviously I wanted to find out why. And they told us that, and I received a Microsoft server lack of delivery email saying that the server of that entire organization, there were 6 people copied on that email, none of them have received it. So I obviously sent them a screenshot on WhatsApp, and they figured out that there was some problem in their system that no emails could come in. And apparently there was an attack over that weekend due to which they have an inbuilt mechanism due to which all email coming in was stopped. But the point I'm trying to make here again is something as simple as a potential attack has led to nobody receiving an email over an entire weekend, which was very important. So again, awareness is very, very, very relevant. Now in that circumstance, the client asked me to send it to their personal email ID. Now and then he forwarded it to from his personal email ID, he accessed using his official laptop. So all I'm trying to say is lack of awareness could have led to a malware traveling across systems, because this happens. We land up using our official laptop sometimes, or personal laptop for official work a number of times if there's urgency. So one is awareness. Two, I think more and more that I'm realizing is people need to know that there are experts who know what's going on and will be able to help us in dealing with a cyber attack. It's not as simple as disconnecting your computer or your network. It is not as simple as switching the server off. You need to engage experts. You need to be able to contact, especially if you're a heavily dependent industry, which is heavily dependent on data and cyber security, then please have your experts contact details ready. Have an expert to whom you can refer a matter to, because they will be able to help you mitigate losses and risk. Third, of course, is please keep your insurer informed. And I think that is one of the most practical advices I can give to any client, because if you don't keep your insurer informed, you're not helping yourself. Buying a policy alone will not help. You need to keep the other side informed so that they can help you mitigate further losses. And last but not the least is, I think, general security measures like changing passwords, not writing them down and leaving them here and there, keeping, like for example, there are systems across organizations where laptop passwords have to be changed every 2 months or every 1 month. That recurring system has to be there, and extremely secure data should have multiple 3i principle or a 4i principle, such that the passwords are protected in a manner that one person's laptop getting hacked will not lead to the entire data getting disseminated. So these are a few practical sort of advices that I can think of. There may be many more. In fact, you will be able to Pawan, you will be able to give many more advices from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Yeah, you correctly said. I mean, these are the controls which one should take care so that they at least secure their environment to whatever extent they could. And in the given situation where the changes have happened in the infrastructure, the organization who were not even ready or ever thought of putting up a policy of work from home, they are also working from home these days. So there are a lot of changes which had happened in the technology. So this question, I mean, I would like to ask Navza, as a CISO or as a CIO or CTO, as a technology professional, people can take care of their technology, what they are implementing, and try to put best control to secure their environment. But the question is, what insured should do in case there is a change in the process technology in their business activity? Do they inform insurer, or what step or what next provision they should make to ensure that they are covered?
Okay, I would love to answer this question. In fact, I was waiting for this. So when it comes to, before I move to actually answering your question, I would like to add what Jyoti said is right now, when you talk about this situation, practically every company, every industry is facing liquidity, cash crunch, and profitability issue. So probably at this point of time to invest further on cybersecurity may not be feasible. In fact, the report says that the 40% of the organization globally have reduced their cybersecurity budget, because ultimately, like everything, like they have to manage with that particular cash which they have. So that's happening. So at this point of time, what we can do is the thing which is available for an organization is to train their employees, to aware their employees as much as they can, so that they can avoid these kind of exposure. So that's on the previous discussion. Now coming back to what an insured can do at this point of time, for all the liability policy, not only for cyber, be transparent with your organization, follow the utmost good faith principle, wherein like any incident probably or circumstance which you feel can lead to a claim, inform the insurer. Now when it comes to insurer, we globally, AIG and Tata AIG feel that it's not just about indemnity when it comes to cyber. Because when we talk about small organization or a SME sector or a private limited company, practically they don't even know when there is a WannaCry attack or when there is a cyber breach, whom to approach. So at that point of time, you need a holistic approach from the insurer, that they just not only provide indemnity to you, but they have a full-fledged crisis response team, which involves forensics, which involves legal consultation, which include crisis consultants. So you should have all those in your panel. So when you're selecting an insurer, look at all these things, that whether they have all these in place or not. The second advice, if you ask me, is the experience of the insurer when it comes to these cyber claims. Because as I said, it's a new field. There's no data. There's no historical data available. Even on the global front, if you ask me, there are very few data. And when it comes to India, as I said, it's just 4 years old policy in the Indian context, and they don't have the historical data, whether it's premium, whether it's claim. So the experience of the insurer in handling the claims is another important thing which you should look at when you're buying the policy. Probably you may save few dollars, but you're talking about a exposure which is rated third among the all other exposures across the globe. So after AOG peril or a situation like a pandemic, cyber is the third exposure which globally has been identified for the organizations. So it's a critical decision for you when you're selecting your insurer, when you're selecting your policy, probably even for that matter, selecting your policy limit. Take a wise decision, think about it from all the angles, and then select your insurer who can not only provide indemnity, but even able to stand with you when it comes to forensics, when it comes to what you call legal consultation and all. Because if it happens, you will not have time to do all the research. You will find you want somebody who can immediately come into action and start mitigating your risk. So that's very important as an insured, that when you're buying a policy, you should look at all these things. That's my take on this.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Naja. What you said completely makes sense, and that should be taken care while deciding or concluding something. I think we have overshot our time. So last question which I would like to ask Jyoti is, Jyoti, what's your opinion to your client in the times when putting special focus on cyber insurance and policy? What do's and don'ts they should take care?
I think from a policy standpoint, I may be repeating a little bit of what Najam was mentioning, but I think not just cyber, any policy standpoint. I think one is complete disclosure. I have personally seen that sometimes people think that this information is so obvious, why should we provide? But if there is a question in the proposal form, there's a reason for the question. So my first advice is absolute accurate disclosure. Whatever has been asked has to be answered in as many terms as it has been asked. Second sort of advice that I would provide the client is, if there is a risk or if there is even a remotest circumstance of a claim arising, you have to be able to communicate with your insurer. I do not see the point of waiting till you're sure about a claim, because there is precious time that is getting lost. That is one. Two, it is not necessary that the person dealing with the claim at the organization's end knows about it well. So what an organization's person may think is not so relevant may be the most relevant period from an insurance standpoint, cyber insurance in particular, because that is so time sensitive. Now we know that an attack can lead to the entire organization setup being struck down as a matter of just few minutes also. So time becomes very sensitive there. So second is to keep the insurer informed, and third is to basically look at it as an exercise of overall cooperation. It's not about just claiming something from your insurer. It's about saving your organization's money, reputation. Several other factors are involved. So to look at it as a more cooperation exercise than an adversary exercise, so that the right time can be spent into correcting what has gone wrong, as against trying to figure out what could have been done better, because that is more of a post facto exercise. From a crisis point of view, my advice would be these three: complete disclosure, cooperation, and providing information on appropriate time.
Absolutely, that's well summed up. I think we have, like I said, that we have overshot our time. There must be questions as well. So I would like to invite Chaitanya so that we can answer questions which have been posted by the audience.
Thank you, Pawan. I think we've broadly covered all aspects. Just a couple of quick questions that we would like to take from the chat that we've received from the attendees today. given the current context, which are the likely industries to be affected by claims for cyber? Apart from the usual suspects, that is BFSI, IT, ITES, which are the likely industries in terms of, which would be affected by the current context? Najam, would you like to answer?
Pawan, please go on, and then I will add.
Sure. So if you ask me, every industry is equally prone. The recent example, nobody thought of Cognizant being in a technology company would have gotten ransomware attack. So in today's world, there is no definition of a particular industry which is prone to an attack. So even a small shop, I would say, is equally prone to any one kind of a phishing attack or a cyber attack as equivalent to any big organization in the world. It's the only difference is the impact. Yeah, Nazam, over to you.
I completely agree with you that every organization have this exposure, and of course, financial institution and as I said, the companies having health data is more exposed because they are the focus for the hackers. But I would like to tell you, and I would like to just compliment what Pawan said. We have seen claims in India on real estate companies. We Tata AG have handled claim on a real estate company, and believe me, as an underwriter, when I was writing that policy, I thought this is the most safest risk. No data liability, and even when it comes to business interruption, nothing will happen to them even if their systems are not working, and paid a huge claim over there. So as I said, no industry is can't claim that okay, they are safe, and especially in these time when you have remote working situations like this.
One more question would be, would you please like to explain a claim scenario from the time that it is reported till it is paid? Because that is one of the questions which has come in terms of, what happens after a claim is reported until such time that it gets paid? What all goes behind the scenes?
Jyoti, would you like to answer this?
Yes, I will answer it, but I think you'll also have some inputs here.
Sure.
From a claim standpoint, I think what happens also is a little bit of a difference in terms of what an insured would do and what an insurer would do. From an insured standpoint, I think, of course, you've notified the claim. Then depending on the threat in question, there are actions you need to take. If you are a heavily publicly present organization, and if the information is already gone outside, then you need to make sure that you engage with a PR agency. Najam already said that there is cover available. There is specific clauses in the policy that will look into that. If the information that has been leaked is of a nature which can cause huge loss to third parties, you need to inform those third parties. I understand it's not easy to tell somebody that I have suffered a cyber attack, but let's please understand, not doing it can also cause you much more larger loss financially, leave alone the reputational loss, the relationship loss, and other non-monetary losses. In fact, here is where I would like to take an example. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Uber. They, in fact, had a huge attack in 2016. It's all in the paper, so there's no problem talking about it. In 2016, they had a number of drivers, around 600,000 drivers and 57 million user accounts. They were breached. Now, instead of actually reporting the incident, they decided to pay the perpetrator. This was a clear-cut case of extortion. The perpetrator asked for about 100,000 US dollars. It was paid and settled, no problem there. Come to 2018, the regulator came to know about it, and they were slapped with a fine of $148 million. So this is something that I wanted to bring out, not to pull down on an organization, but to show that you need to have a long-term vision. As an insured, as a person on whom the attack has happened, you need to communicate to the relevant people. Insurer, definitely, but also the obvious stakeholders in your attack. And last but not the least, there are going to be special services that you have to engage, like forensics, like legal services will be required, crisis management may be required, and several others, depending on the multifoldness of the attack. And ultimately, the idea should be to cooperate with all of these agencies, especially with your insurer and these other agencies that you engage, to mitigate your loss. It's a good idea to find out who did it, but simultaneously you have to take steps to mitigate your losses too. Not doing one and doing the other will not help. So I think from a step-by-step plan, all of these, sometimes in different orders vis-a-vis each other, ought to be followed.
Correct.
Najam, anything from you?
Yep. So thanks, Jyoti. Just like to add few points. So see, understand, Chaitanya, globally, when it comes to liability policy, what insurer expect before accepting any liability or before incurring any expenses with respect to your claim which is covered under the policy, you should inform the insurer. That's the expectation which we have. Although in the cyber policy there are covers inbuilt which talks about emergency situation wherein you can go ahead, spend on forensics within first 48 hours, and then you inform the insurance company with honor those claims. But when you talk about reporting, please report the circumstances to the insurer immediately, as soon as possible, over the phone, over the mail. Just inform the insurer that this is what has happened. And then, because see, understand, every liability claim, including every cyber incident, is different from one to other. So you will not have a list of document that, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, you submit and then the claims will be processed. Every claim will be different from one to other. And that's why, like, the first thing what as an insurer I expect is to get a notification of the incident, that what has happened, probably like a brief 5-7 lines brief about the incident, location, about details or expected what you call amount, and then subsequently we will, like, with the discussion of with the insured, we'll have a forensics, and we will have a law firms, or we will have a crisis communication consultant appointed to take it forward. So that's how a cyber claim can be addressed.
One last question. What is the level of penetration amongst corporates for cyber insurance policies and amongst individuals as well? Because I think everyone is vulnerable to this risk. And if we were to run a poll now in terms of how many of us have insured ourselves, probably none of us would actually put their hands up and say that we've insured ourselves. Would you like to speak about that?
So the insurance penetration in India is extremely low as compared to the cross globe. Like even Asian countries, we are one of the lowest when it comes to insurance. Talking about cyber, probably what I understand by the market, although there's no official data as such, but what I understand from market, speaking to my peers, there are 700 to 800 only cyber policies in India at this point of time. Of course, the number have increased, like the referrals and the conversion from 1st of April. I have seen the surge on the submissions on the cyber side. When it comes to probably on the individual cyber policy, again, probably like I think 10,000 policies, not more than that, when it comes to individual cyber. So that's the penetration level which we have. So it's not even 1% of the companies who are registered under the Companies Act have cyber policy at this point of time in India. So and moreover, I would like to add, see, most of them, when it comes to these cyber policies, most of the IT and outsourcing companies have contractual requirement, and that's why they bought those policies. When it comes to the banking or the financial institution, because it's highly regulated industry and the regulator is after them, so we see conversion over there. But definitely there is a positive move also. We see a lot of manufacturing company wherein, like, you don't even have the contractual requirement, and nor your regulator is asking you to buy a cyber policy, but still people are now aware of this exposure and started buying this policy.
Thank you, Najam. Thank you, Pawan. Thank you, Najam, and thank you, Jyoti. Over to you, Aruna. And to the attendees, we'd like to mention that, whichever questions have not been answered during the course of the webinar today, we will take it offline and definitely respond to you. Over to you, Arun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya. I'm sure, I mean, today's session, even if we go beyond the time also, the day is not enough to discuss this. And Pawan has a lot of live experiences to share with the audiences. Maybe in time to come, whenever we launch our season 3 is where we'll think about doing the part 2 session of this, continuing with our same speakers of giving us the knowledge on this platform for cyber insurance. On this note, I would like to call upon our Group Vice Chairman, Mr. Gautam Budak, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Aruna. Good evening, everyone. Trust you all had good time listening to the informative session by our speakers today. I would like to convey my sincere thanks and appreciate Mr. Pawan, Mr. Najam, and Ms. Jyoti for putting up an incredible discussion today on critical topic of cyber risk and insurance. We are fortunate to have you all with us today. Your willingness to share your time and expertise in the areas of cyber risk and insurance was critical to the success of this event. I also wish to appreciate all the efforts put in by our team, led by Mr. Vaidya. And once again, on behalf of JB Boda Group, I would like to thank you one and all for joining us today. Take care and stay safe. Over to you, Aruna.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you once again. Thank you, Pawan, for being over here with us. Thank you, Najam. Thank you, Jyoti. But at the end, I would like to know a closing comment. Jyoti, I'll come to you last because the lawyers should always speak last to close the entire deal. So, Pawan, you're the client who are into procuring such kind of an insurance requirement. What is your closing statement on this?
Well, I got a very good insight from the underwriter perspective and the legal perspective. I need to make sure to get pulled off now. So definitely, it was a very informative session. I really enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to having more such sessions like that.
Thank you so much. Najam, you're the underwriter. I mean, when the clients come to you with all this information, what is that one thing you would like to give as a closing comment?
No, so it's a great exposure when it comes to cyber, as I said in my initial remark, and this has to be considered very seriously when the organization is thinking about risk management. I will not say that this could be looked at as a cyber security. The cyber security is different. They should have a good cyber security, but at the same time, as a risk transfer, cyber insurance is very useful, and they should look at as a risk transfer mechanism rather than risk security, a cyber security tool.
Thank you. Jyoti, please close the session.
I think in today's session, I've found out, because of Najam and Pawan sharing their experiences, that there are so many different kinds of claims that I can right now think about having arisen but not reported, not known by people. I think one thing that I want to sort of close with is please read your cyber policy. There is much more that it covers than one knows about. So I think that's where I want to close. Please read your policies.
Thank you so much. So all of you, please do follow the notes and the information our intelligent speakers have given today. Take care of yourself. Have a very good weekend. Look forward to seeing you on 25th of May for employee benefit session. I'm sure all of you would be worried for how your health insurance policy is robust enough to pay the coronavirus claims. Do log in on 25th of May at 5 p.m. See you till then. Take care. Be safe.